Carl Dwayne Griggs, United States Army, Vietnam. Carl served with the 5th Special Forces in Vietnam as a Green Beret. He enlisted in 1965 and went to Vietnam in 1966. Carl has one of the most gripping, compelling stories I've ever heard. A lot of you have watched Jerry McNally's story that I shared last week, and Lee Alley, Lieutenant Alley, Terry Simmons, Charles Battershaw, Ed Masterson, Charlie Harris, and others that I've uploaded. And I'm going to encourage you to watch and to share this story. Folks, freedom is not free. And I remember interviewing Carl and his brother Gary, who was with the Airborne in Vietnam, in Independence, Missouri, 2010, May 28th, at Speaks Chapel. And I'm telling you what, their stories are just tremendous. And you know, I just encourage you watching these videos to share them with others and to remember, you know, what we're doing here. You know, we're fighting for the same freedoms today in our own country, folks, that our veterans fought for in a foreign land. Carl and Gary Griggs, they represent the Vietnam generation. And I want to thank Brandon Glidden. He's a young man who has stepped forward. He served in the Army himself, and he sees the importance of these stories and the history that's being lost. Folks, if we don't remember from our history, we're condemned to repeat it. How many times have we heard that? It's true. So I say every page of history lost, these stories become more precious and valuable. So I encourage you to step forward and consider sponsoring one of these stories. I don't monetize my videos, never will. I don't watch videos that are monetized for the most part because I don't think that's where the heart of what we're doing is at. So anyways, with that, Brandon, thank you again. And I'm glad to share with you my complete interview with Carl Griggs. So just sit back, another eyes and ears. These veterans are my eyes and ears to a doorway of the past. And as Carl travels back to Vietnam and shares what it was like being 19 years old in the jungle, out in the bush in Vietnam. It's a tremendous story, folks. I encourage you to share it. God bless you. Thank you for watching. Freedom is not free. It's never free. And I thank you for your support of my work.
Because the last name is Griggs.
Griggs.
Carl, how
Carl.
old are you now?
I'm 63.
Okay. Amazing that all the Vietnam vets we've interviewed the last couple of days are 63. Every single one of them.
Because we were all 19 years old when we were in Nam.
Well, did you get drafted?
No, I enlisted in the Army in 1965,
Wow.
right out of high school.
So did you know anything about Vietnam then?
Never heard of it in my life. It was that was just a strange place when the first time I ever heard the name Vietnam.
So why did you go in the Army?
I went in the Army, basically most of my relatives were, you know, we had a history of our relatives being in the military, and I wanted it, but most of them were in the Navy, and I wanted to be in the Army because I always wanted to be a paratrooper. So the Navy didn't have paratroopers. So I enlisted in the Army so that I could make sure I got to be a paratrooper.
So 82nd, 101st, what did you do?
Well, I went to Fort Benning for jump school, and right after jump school, I was introduced to a fella who was wearing a green hat, and he said, they said, we're looking for guys to volunteer for a special group of guys that at that time were actually hidden from the public, and that was called the Green Berets. And so I come to such and such a room tonight at 7 o'clock and we'll talk some more. So I went there, and in fact the guy tried to talk me out of it and said, you know, I don't think you're cut out to do this, and you know, and like that. But I kept persisting, you know, I really want to do it. I just finished jump school, and you know, I'd like to really, you know, I don't know what it is. Well, you don't even know what it is. You know, why do you? I mean, they really made it hard for you to try to get in. And then of course then we had to take a test, and I got accepted. I went to they put you through a 2-week period of assessment to see if they're really going to use you or not. and I went through that, and then I got in, went to Camp McCall, and started my training with the Special Forces.
Wow. So Vietnam, you were a Green Beret?
I was in Vietnam. Yeah.
But you were part of the Green Berets?
Yes.
Wow.
I was one.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So what year did you go over to Nam?
I went to Nam in 1966. In 1966, I went over and went by ship. And we actually landed on the beach near Vung Tau in Higgins boats. And there's not a lot of guys that went to Nam by ship, but there was every once in a while I run into somebody. But yeah, not a lot of guys went there by ship. We came in on Higgins boats. You know, the ramp dropped down. We went ashore. Unlike in World War II, we weren't met with a hell of resistance. We moved inland and went and started setting up our camp. Later, I had the opportunity to go up to Nha Trang, where the 5th Special Forces, I was with the 5th Group, and I went up there and then went on many assignments after that. And I was involved in some, mostly down in South, in the beginning, I was in South Vietnam and operated in some areas called the Iron Triangle, kind of a garden spot of Vietnam, if you will. You could literally, you were going to be in a firefight just about every day there. You're going to get mortared at night, and you're going to be in running gunfights during the day. And we went on an operation. They had an operation called Cedar Falls, Operation Cedar Falls. It was a large operation. It didn't last very long. We went up on the Cambodian border, and back then during Vietnam, body count was a big deal. I think we had a little over 700 body count in about a week and a half. And so it wasn't, we didn't really feel like that was really that good of an operation. It wasn't that productive in the aspect that that we were looking for a bigger body count. We backed that right up with an operation called Operation Junction City. Operation Junction City was, we went up to the Cambodian border again, and the Cambodian border was a hot spot because up along places like An Loc and Loc Ninh and Parrots Beak and the Iron Triangle, Hobo Woods, all Vietnam veterans that are combat soldiers will recognize all of those names I just mentioned. We set up a tactical maneuver against the enemy there that were flooding across out of Cambodia, and our body count at that time was 3,600. We killed 3,600 enemy soldiers in about 2 weeks. And we lost about 280 guys, and 300 or 400 probably wounded, somewhere in that neighborhood. But we lost about 200. We lost about 280 guys. And that part's always difficult to talk about.
Were these all Green Berets?
No, they were from various units. We had several units involved in that operation.
What was your rank?
I was corporal at that time, and I made sergeant while I was there. The attrition, amongst Green Berets, the Green Berets primarily is a very small unit, very small. But we lost. Our casualty ratio was 50%, and so half of every Green Berets that ever went to Vietnam died there, and because of the type of operations that you go on and that you get assigned to, creates those kind of statistics. And so it's very tough. When we first got to Vietnam in 1966, what we found was the South Vietnamese Army. They had camps all the way up north to the DMZ. But the problem of it is that the enemy had pushed them all to the coast. So they had reset up new camps. They were all basically set up along the coast. They had literally no penetration into the interior of the country. Every time that they would get out of their base camps to move inland to go on any kind of a mission, they were immediately met with NLF soldiers. NLF, not the NFL, but the NLF, National Liberation Front soldiers. These are soldiers that have some training, but they're not the hardcore in uniform soldiers, or what we call regulars. But they had some training and were very well equipped. Now you had the Viet Cong, who are just farmers by day, soldiers by night. Then you had the NLF, National Liberation Front, a little better trained soldiers, and then you had the regulars who wore uniforms. And so you had three different tiers of people that you were fighting against. We found that the South Vietnamese soldiers were completely just basically pinned in along the coastline, and we're making no progress as far as penetrating into the interior of the country. What it became our job was to get in there in 1966 and get into the interior, and especially at nighttime, to take the night fighting away from them, and make it to where that they feared to go out at night when the enemy before totally controlled the night. That was their time. Well, we flip-flopped that, and that became our time. That was the time that we did most of our missions, was at nighttime, because you have the element of surprise, and of course you can't be seen. Yeah. So we did most of our operations at nighttime, and one of our operations was an operation called Operation Phoenix, and that was to kill all the leadership of the NLF. And we had good. My MOS was intelligence, so I had the opportunity to have the insight to a lot of this stuff, and so we knew where a lot of them were and where we could find them. We had good intelligence. We had guys that were South Vietnamese agents in the field operating, and then we would go find these guys and where they were, and we took them out.
Yeah. What kind of weapon did you carry?
Well, we could carry any kind of weapon that we wanted to, and I carried various weapons. I carried basically an M16 most of the time. I also carried a sawed-off shotgun for a while, and I've carried an AK-47. I've carried, I had an Israeli. In fact, I had an Israeli Uzi for a little while, and I have a lot of different weapons. We did usually in one of our Special Forces team is a 12-man team, and we generally carried at least one weapon that was that had a silencer, so we could slip in and out of villages at night. The dogs would give you away. In fact, we called the silencers hush puppies, because the dogs would run up to us and give us away, and we would have to shoot the dogs. And and that way we could get in and out of the villages, and sometimes even regular officers, soldiers that were in the officer corps would go into villages and spend the night there, and eat with the people and spend the night there, and we would go in there and take care of those people that were there if we had intelligence knowing where they were.
Now, Carl, you were there for a year?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you obviously saw a lot happen. I can tell by just talking with you already, but
yeah.
Was there, you lost friends probably, I'm sure, people that you knew?
You lost, that was, losing your buddies was something that was extremely difficult. I still see their faces today. I still have nightmares about them. And that's some of the help that the veterans hospitals try to give, and they try to give us help, as far as getting beyond that. You never will. Once you're wired for that, it's there forever. And you become, you lose buddies. They go on missions with you, and you lose them, and there's nothing you can do. The problem of it is you don't have time to stay and grieve them. And you lose them, but the mission comes first. Doesn't matter how many guys are left. If it's down to the last guy, the mission has to be completed. And so if you lose people, the only thing we never wanted to leave a guy behind, try to get him out of there. The great thing is we had dust-offs and helicopters in Vietnam where they didn't, like in World War II. We could get guys out of there. Well, I know myself, I was wounded 1966 on the Cambodian border. I got wounded up there and received a Purple Heart, and it'd fly you back to a hospital and take care of you. And that was a great morale booster for us, is to know that even if we get killed, they'll get a chopper in here and get me out. The one thing that we had amongst all of us, all soldiers, not just Green Berets, but almost all combat soldiers, is make sure you get me out of here. If I go down, make sure you get me out of here. So get me back to the States. We called it the world. Get me back to the world. And so that was a big thing for us, you know.
Well, tell me about the importance of the helicopter in that capacity, and maybe were there times where you helped load the wounded or the dead into the helicopters?
Well, probably all combat soldiers has helped do that before, help their buddies that were wounded. You know, you try to stabilize the guy fast as you can. With Green Berets, to be a medic with the Green Beret team, you have to have 2 years of training at Fort Sam Houston in the hospital, because you have to be able to perform an appendectomy in the field, or tracheotomy, or many other critical medical situations that may arise. Stop, guys shot in the chest, how to stop a bleeding, chest wound, or what we call sucking chest wound.
Did you help do some of that? You seem to know a lot of this stuff. Did you help with some of that?
Well, all combat soldiers has helped their buddies that's gone down. Either, if they're wounded, you're down there trying to help them too, Sometimes, a guy gets shot 2 or 3 times, or he's got shrapnel all over in him. It's not kind of like in the movies. It's really not like the movies, It's guys get blown to pieces, and there's pieces and parts of people all over the place. And I've been in some fights where, afterwards you'd walk around, and I literally picked one of my buddies' boots up and it still had his foot in it. And, you put that in a body bag, and, Graves Registry goes to Graves Registration, you tag it and bag them, and away they go. But guys that are wounded, you try to get the dust off them, but you can't always get them in. But it is kind of a funny scenario, because the chopper pilots would always call us and go, "Is the LZ hot?" And we would tell them, "No," because we're afraid they wouldn't come. If we told them, "Yeah, it's hot," we're afraid they wouldn't come in to get our buddies. So we'd always tell them. So that became a thing with the helicopter pilots. They just laughed too, because they knew we were lying to them. They'd go, "Is the LZ hot?" We'd tell them, "No, we've got a good place for you to sit down." Well, we did have a good place for you to sit down, but you are going to get shot at when you get here. And but they would still, they were great guys. They would come in. I've seen them come in under a hail of gunfire. And of course, when a chopper starts coming in, the enemy would direct their fire immediately to the chopper, because in their thinking, they'd been trained back in Hanoi that, that's an expensive piece of equipment. Take it out. Will hurt them economically. Not only will you kill the crew, but you just knock down $1 million piece of equipment. So is that a big deal to soldiers? Sure, we tried to do the very same thing. Except they took all of their MiG fighters and they took them north and parked them up in China. They had 200 MiG fighters sitting up there, and they had 600 tanks, T-54s and T-55s. Setting up there. I have had enemy tanks come after me before, way up north, but primarily they had more tanks than Patton had in World War II, except they had them hid. They took them across into China, and the only way you're going to do that is go to war with China. That wasn't going to happen. But anyway, on the choppers, we'd get choppers. We'd call for dust off. We've got, we'd tell them how many wounded we had. We use a code when we tell them that, so the enemy doesn't know, we're not giving, because they know your units, just like we knew their units. We knew how many men that was in the 10th Sapper Battalion. I mean, I knew how many was in that. We were keeping track of their unit strength, and they tried to keep track of our unit strength.
Well, when you first went to Vietnam, you were, what, 19, you said?
I was 19.
Well, you'd never been in combat before.
No.
And then all of a sudden all this stuff starts to happen. What happens to you as a person? I mean, how does it change you? And tell me about the fear, if there's fear in combat.
Obviously, there's the fear factor is sheer terror, and there's no way that you could ever. I could not explain it to anyone. If you sit and watch a movie, if you ever saw the movie Saving Private Ryan, the first 15 minutes of that movie is probably as accurate as anything I've ever seen. So, but when you're there, when you're there and it's happening to you, and it always explodes out of nothing. You know, it's a patrol that's moving along, and you've been humping in the bush all day long trying to find the enemy, because every mission that you have is a contact mission. You know, the mission is to find the enemy and kill the enemy. That's the mission. You don't have any other missions. It's, you know, find the enemy, make contact, destroy the enemy. That's the mission.
Search and destroy.
Search and destroy every day. Make contact with the enemy, destroy the enemy. That is the mission daily. At nighttime, you dig a foxhole, you set up in a circle in what we call the perimeter defense to fight out, and then you sneak, you take a group of guys and you slip out of that, away from there, and you go set up an ambush somewhere, hoping that maybe the enemy will come down a trail someplace and you can ambush him. And we were very successful in doing that. And of course, at times they were successful in doing that too. Sometimes your ambush patrol going out to set up an ambush got ambushed. But when you're going along on a patrol and you're looking around and you know, you're watching and you're trying to watch the trees, you're watching the ground for booby traps, you're watching for the enemy, you're watching for everything. The mosquitoes are horrendous. The leeches are eating you up because the places in the jungle, it's steamy, it's hot, you're sweating. Leeches are everywhere. Every creek that you cross, every little stream you cross is full of leeches. They're sucking blood on you. They've got these ants over there that seem to, you know, everything in the jungle wants to bite you or sting you. And there's a lot of poisonous snakes.
Did you ever come to a point where you asked yourself the question, how did I get into this?
Yeah,
you
do.
ever think about home and the fact that you're
You
here?
think about home all the time. You think about how nice it would be to go back home. You have to understand, for a lot of guys, 6 or 7 months earlier, they were at their senior prom that you're there with. You know, 6 months ago, they were at the senior prom. Now, it wasn't quite like that for me because I went in and I had almost a year of training to do. So, but for guys that, because I enlisted, but for guys that got drafted, you know, they got drafted, they went to basic training for 8 weeks and then AIT for 8 weeks, and they were in Nam. 6 months earlier, they were trying to get in the back seat with their date and have a little kissy face. And here all of a sudden they are in a place where people are trying to kill them. And they're seeing people get killed. And they're having to kill people. And there's something about it when you have to kill a man. When you get close enough to kill a man, the difference in a lot of, like World War II or something, in Nam, when you're on a patrol and you get ambushed and all of a sudden it blows up, it's 20 or 30 or 40 feet from you. It ain't, you know, 400 meters or a mile away where you're shooting artillery back at each other. It is up close and personal. And the firefight's on, and it's whoever has the best, can get the most firepower out the fastest, that's who wins. And guys are going to get hit. You hear guys screaming, guys are getting hit. Battlefields are real noisy places. And guys are getting shot, guys are getting, you know, grenades are being thrown back and forth at each other. I mean, at the rate that, you know, you see them potato mashers coming at you and green tracers come flying at you, you know. And, I mean, the instant it happens, you're on the ground and you're fighting, but, I mean, and both of you are trying to outmaneuver each other, you know, get on this flank, get on this guy's flank, move on this guy's flank, circle around, but it's all happening, man, just like this.
Why did you go to the documentary showing the other day? You heard it advertised and you just wanted to go see
I heard about it. I thought it was a Vietnam thing.
it? Last year was Vietnam.
Well, I went there and I thought it wasn't. I thought, well, it was World War II, and I thought, well, I'm here. I'll just go ahead and watch it, you know. I'll go ahead and see it. And, you know, I started talking to some, you know, like this old elder gentleman that just left, you know. We're a band of brothers. Right. It really doesn't matter what war yet you were in. If you're a combat soldier slugging it out, it don't matter whether you were slugging it out in the snow or in the Pacific or in Vietnam or stuff. We all share that same experience, because for that space of time right there, it doesn't matter. It's all about life right then. Life, all of a sudden, at 19, you realize that you are not invincible, that you can die because you're seeing guys die. And all of a sudden, you realize that how precious life really is. you start thinking about everything. I saw guys die that have never, I got to watch what I say and be careful, but young guys died they never had a chance to get married. They never had, some of them never even really had a steady girlfriend. Well, your kids are 18 years old. They didn't know nothing from nothing. You know, some of them, I met them from all over, out of Chicago, off the streets of Chicago, tough kids. I met kids off the farm that they were so naive, they didn't know nothing from nothing. And guys from every walk of life that you can imagine, kids that came from very families that had lots to kids right off the street that barely owned a pair of shoes. The Army gave them more clothes than they ever owned in their life. I've seen them all. I've been around them all. And the worst thing about it in Vietnam is after you've been there for several months and you survived, young and new guys come in, and you don't want to hardly know their names because you don't know if they're going to make it or not, and you don't want to get too attached to them. And that starts a process after the war that takes its toll because you don't let nobody get close to you no more because too much pain is associated with it and with losing people. And guys die and they're killed, and after the battles are over, you come back and we shine their boots and we have a 21 gun salute for them, and you know, but they're gone, man. And guess what? There's a Western Union going to go to their mom and dad's house that says your little Johnny was killed day before yesterday or whatever in Vietnam. And you know, that's a tough thing. There's going to be no grandkids from this guy that they thought, you know, it'll be great to have some grandchildren and that. All the guy's hopes, dreams, everything else is gone in an instant, and it's over.
Have you ever been to the Vietnam Wall?
Not in Washington. I've been to the traveling wall. I'm going to make a trip to I've actually have put it off, and I went to the traveling wall. It was here in Clinton, Missouri, a little farm community. Not too well, about 3 years ago, 3 or 4 or 5, man, no longer than that, 7 or 8 years ago now. And I went to it, and it's a very tough thing to do. You know, a bunch of guys on that wall, and
how did this change you as a person? You were 19. You were, you know, a year between school. You get out. You get into the Vietnam. You know, you're from the States, and how did it change you? I mean,
well, it changes you. You're never going to be the same again. And at 19 years old, when you come out of Vietnam, you don't feel 19, you feel 40. Like one guy says, you know, man, I went there when I was 18 years old. I mean, it just, you know, I was still a teenager. It just stole my life. Well, you have to be careful, or it can do that. But it changes you forever. And there's things going to stick with you that's going to be there forever. I read a book one time. It was called "Once a Warrior, Wired for Life," and it does. It wires you for life.
How did it change your perspective of death and life? And are you a praying man, a religious man?
Well, yeah, I am. To answer your question, I'm a Christian. I'm a born-again Christian, and you realize when you look, especially when you look back on it, man, you think about it, how precious that life is amazingly precious. And I've seen guys do acts of bravery in combat that cost them their life. They didn't specifically do it for America. They did it for their buddies. I don't, at that age, I'm not sure that you really have a grasp of the whole picture of, you know, you're not thinking of Valley Forge in the Revolutionary War and the guys at Tarawa and Guadalcanal and everything else and Pork Chop Hill and all that. You're not thinking about that. You're not thinking about Betsy Ross and all that, but you're thinking about those buddies right there that we could absolutely trust with our life. We truly could trust them with our life, and we counted on them. every day, and we counted on each other. And life is so precious in that aspect that as today, as I wasn't in Vietnam, I wasn't really. I mean, I believed in God and everything, and on some missions, before some missions, like Operation Cedar Falls and Junction City, they had priests come out and they prayed for us and gave us the last rites and all that, and Copa Mea, Moxie Copa Mea, good luck to you, may God go with you, and away you go, and. But I will tell you this, that I had a buddy who was a non-believer, and they said, we're going to let half you guys, half you guys, keep watching, half you guys go back. You can pray with the priest, let the priest pray over you that want to go. And this buddy of mine, he went. His name was Anatoly. Actually, he was of Russian descent. And I said, Anatoly, I thought you didn't believe. And he's like that. He looked at me and goes, insurance. And I was like, okay, so.
Well, listen, tell me about your last day in Vietnam. What do you remember about your last day?
Last day in Vietnam. That was a great day. Actually, I didn't know I was going home. Really, I didn't have any idea. I wasn't even thinking about getting to go home yet. And I knew that I was getting short as time. I mean, they only made you do a year because unlike today in the Iraqi war, where they're calling guys are having to go back for more tours because they only have so many guys. During Vietnam, they were just drafting more guys. They didn't draft more guys. They had 500,000 guys drafted, so they had guys and they could get more. But my last day, I was actually at that point I was up north. I did a lot of fighting and was on many operations down south. Then I was moved up north and went into Laos and on Operation Raven and again on Operation Phoenix. And I was getting set up for the night because I was going to do an ambush patrol and I was kind of getting, laying out. I was a sergeant at that time. I was kind of laying out my map where I was going to take the guys and we were going to set up on a trail and I was trying to get things laid out. And this lieutenant, who became a pretty good friend of mine, just walked over and said, there's going to be a helicopter here in about 10 minutes. You're going to be on it. And I'm like, to go where? I mean, I'd been, a lot of times they'd told me, get on a helicopter. Well, it wasn't to go home. It was go somewhere else to help out somewhere, help some guys out that were in trouble. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, you're going home. And I mean, it was just like going home. I'm going home. I mean, it stunned me for a minute, just like took me by surprise because I'm in the combat mode, I'm not in the going home mode. And I was trying to shake it off, and I'm like, what about my weapons and stuff? He said, you need to go over and see Sergeant, I don't remember his name now, turn your weapons into him, And well, at that time I carried an M16 and a 45 and I don't know, probably 2 or 3 other guns that I kept on me. But I had a bunch of stuff to turn in, so I was like, okay. And sure enough, the helicopter came and they were like, GRIGGS, get on the helicopter. And I'm like, okay, I didn't know where it was going. It really didn't matter at that point. But if it was going towards home, I was ready to go. Well, actually, they flew me over to Chu Lai, and which was on the coast, and it's up north and on the coast. And they flew me up to Chu Lai, got on a C-130, flew me south to Tan Son Nhut Air Force Base, got on an airplane, a civilian airliner. They had civilian airliners there, and got on a civilian airliner, and no guns or nothing, but I'm still in my jungle uniform, and still got mud on my boots, and away we go. We take off and we fly in the air. And one thing we knew is that the North Vietnamese had a lot of rockets, and we were afraid they would shoot us down before we could get out of there. And the plane takes off, but when it got out over water, we knew the 7th Fleet was sitting out there. And we knew they couldn't get out there where the 7th Fleet was. And well, man, you could hear a pin drop on that airplane. And, because you remember, I came over by ship. That took me 22 days to get there by ship. And now I'm going to fly home, and we're going to fly to Yokota, Japan, and then jump from Yokota to the States. But when we got out over water, man, that place just erupted on that airplane. And in fact, we scared the stewardesses. And that was quite a thing, too. We were actually looking at real American women, which was a great thing. And, you know, you got to go on R&R when you were in Vietnam. And but they would, you know, you could go to the Philippines, you could go to Japan, and you could go to places where they had more Oriental women. Well, it was a great thing. Let me just say this: it was a great thing to see some American women. And so the airplane just, you know, exploded with applause. Guys were, you know, just, you know, we're out over the ocean. We get to Japan, take on fuel, and head for the States. And we come to the States, flew into the States, and they flew us into Travis Air Force Base, Vacaville, California. And we're coming into Travis, and it was at night, and I could begin to see the coastline. And I was looking out the window, and for the first time in a long time, I could see red, orange, blue. You have no idea what that's like. All I've been seeing is green. There are no colors in the jungle. Men don't have red on them. They don't have blue on them or white on them, or anything else that are those colors, because it gives your position away. It's just you become a target. You know, I remember one time I got hit in the eye it was an accident by an antenna off of a APC, and it busted my eye all open. And the medic, who wasn't a Green Beret medic, because I was attached to another unit right then, taped a big hunk of gauze, because I had blood all over my face, and he tapes this big hunk of white gauze on me, and I'm like, is that the only color you got? I mean, you might as well put a bullseye on me. And but he's like, well, let me see if I can find something that's camouflaged, and I appreciate that. But anyway, I'm looking at the coastline, and it was so wonderful to see all those bright colors again. And we land, and I'm putting my feet back on American soil. I'm back home. And from there, they sent me to Presidio. Presidio is a very small little base south of San Francisco. Hardly nobody there. And when I got there, and most guys, I never met another guy that went there. But there was guys there because I was one of them. But I don't know why they sent me there, but I went there. They usually sent guys somewhere else. But anyway, I go to Presidio. They sent me up to Presidio. And I was met there by a sergeant, and he brought a few of us guys in there, most of us all Green Berets, that he had collected there. And he gave us this little ticket. And he said, this ticket right here? He said, you see that building right over there? Where? Yeah. He said, that is the mess hall for you guys. You take that ticket, you can go in there 24 hours a day, and you can have steak and eggs. You want to go over there at 3 o'clock in the morning, have steak and eggs? Go. You want to go over there at 1 o'clock in the morning, 9 o'clock at night, whatever you want to do, they're there to wait on you guys, eat around the clock. And we were like, wow. Well, unfortunately, and I went over there, and well, we all went over there. Unfortunately, our stomachs were shrunk up so much that we couldn't eat a steak. We hadn't ate a steak in so long that we've been eating sea rations out of a can. And most of all of our sea rations in 1966 and 1967 were World War II rations. All the cans on them said 1942, 1943. In fact, we were like, is this stuff safe to eat? And they were like, well, yeah. And we're like, okay. Well, we did. We lived off that. That's what we ate. But we usually ate it on the run. You know, we took a sock. It came in a little box. And in that box had the main meal, like steak and potatoes. And these little greasy things, medallions of some kind of mystery meat, and little potatoes that had been in there for 20 years. And Greeks just packed in there, you know. So much sodium, I mean, you had to drink water to get them down. But we'd take all the stuff out of that box. We couldn't carry, everything we carried had to be on our back. So we'd take a sock and we'd stretch the sock out and slide down the main meals into that sock and tie that and put it on our rucksack. You could carry all the boxes. And, you know, like anything like pound cake was a premium. You could trade pound cake for life almost. Pound cake was like cherished in Vietnam. And if you had fruit to go with it, like peaches or something, peaches and pound cake, brother, you had a meal.
So back home, I'm running out of some time, but
Okay.
here's what I want to get to at the end with you.
Okay.
Your interview is amazing. I mean, I've heard a lot of stories, but Carl, this is very good stuff. Transitioning back into civilian life, that was tough.
Well, when I came back, I still had time to do in the Army.
Okay.
I enlisted in the Army, so I still had more time to
Maybe
do.
that was good for you then.
Yeah, good and bad. I was stationed, they sent me to Fort Carson, Colorado. As a Green Beret, I went up there. The 5th Mechanized Infantry was getting ready to be mobilized. Great place to be stationed. Loved it up there. And but my job there was to train. They wanted to train LRP teams, long range reconnaissance patrol teams, and so they had to have somebody that had that kind of expertise. And there was about 10 of us up there, Green Berets up there, and we trained LRP teams, and we set it up. Very difficult to do in Colorado, because part of the time when I got there, I think it was about in July, and but it's open territory. If you've been around Fort Carson, you know the terrain. You're from Grand Junction,
Yes.
if I remember right. So very difficult to do, and I was always constantly complaining. We need to take these guys and we need to take them down to Fort Gordon, Georgia, or some other place to where that they AP Hill or someplace like that, where I can get them into the forest. More like it is in Vietnam. The closer that I could, get to that kind of or let's take them over to Panama, to jungle school. And well, they didn't like that. They wanted to do conventional warfare. Well, how are you going to do conventional warfare with LRP teams? But anyway, it was a constant running battle between me and higher ranking officers there, and I didn't get along with those folks very well. But the transition into civilian life was difficult for me and remained difficult the rest of my life. And at the time, I mean, it wasn't a good time to be a soldier, really. The American sentiment. You have to understand that when I left Presidio and I came home, nobody, some guys will tell stories that they got called baby killers and stuff like that. No one ever called me that. Really good that they didn't. Wasn't the right kind of guy or the right frame of mind to have anybody mess with me. But I found that I hitchhiked home. I just got out of Presidio, walked out of Presidio, and just stuck out my thumb. And you know what? I don't think I stood there more than 3 or 4 minutes. I smoked in those days. I could maybe get a half a cigarette smoked, and I'd have another ride. And I found that people were, though there was no cars driving around saying support the troops, and we, as Vietnam veterans, we didn't have none of that. That's what's so good about the young guys today in Afghanistan and Iraq. They do, and we'd really try to pull them into us and help them. But I didn't find that, at all. I would stick out my thumb. One car, well, I can take you down to this road, and then I got to get off. And okay. And as soon as he let me off, I'd get out, and have a smoke and be standing there with my duffel bag in uniform and stick my thumb out. I wouldn't even get a half a cigarette smoked in another car. In fact, one time I remember 2 cars almost wrecked trying to get to me to pick me up. And, where are you headed, and took me. And one guy bought me lunch and, well, let's stop and have lunch, and I said, well, I don't have a lot of money, they got my pay all messed up in the Army. I just came back from overseas, and which it was had my funds all messed up. But
I want to keep going and going. I want to get your brother in a little bit, but I want to ask you a question. If you don't want to answer it, that's fine. But I've talked to a lot of Navy corpsmen, medics, chaplains, ministers from World War II, the Korean War, Vietnam, and even those serving today. Men dying on the battlefield. Were you with some of the men when they died?
lots of them.
Do they talk? Do they?
They all say the same thing when they're dying. They either ask for God or they cry out for mama. Everyone. Almost everyone. If they don't just die, which some of them do. Some of them just die. They don't utter anything. Their wounds are such that they're unable to speak. But many of them, that in fact almost all of them, cry out for God or for Mama, and sometimes both. And I think, because some of them are 18, 19 years old, we were probably, in age-wise, probably the youngest group of guys that ever went to war. In World War II, a lot of that would probably, people would go, really? I think World War II, because I know my daddy went in when he was 16. Well, it was, but they also had a lot of 40-year-old guys in there. In Vietnam, if you knew a guy that was 22 or 23, we called him Pops. We were all 18 or 19, almost all of us. And I turned out to be, in my unit, I was the youngest guy there. But everybody was only, a few months older than me. But yeah, on a battlefield, yeah, you hear them call for Mama and God almost always. And they call for their Mama because I think for some guys that's the closest attachment, They don't know, they're dying. They've got moments, seconds to live. And you're trying to do all you can for them. And we're, hang in there, hold on, words are meaningless, when your body's torn to shreds, bullets from an AK-47 or something, it'll just absolutely tear you to pieces. And, battlefields and combat, is brutal. It's something. So when guys say, well, you guys that fought in the war and stuff, you guys are just, you're hawks, you're hawkish about wars and stuff like that. Let me tell you something. It's the last thing on earth that I want to see is a war ever, because I've been in one. I know what it's like. I know what it's like day in and day out. When I went to the Iron Triangle, I stayed in there for 3 months without coming out. No change of clothes, no hot food, no shower, no nothing. Stayed in the bush and just stay in there and just keep getting missions over and over and over, and they're always the same thing. Search and destroy, make contact with the enemy, hold contact, make contact, destroy. And after 3 months of that, I don't have the picture. I have a daughter that lives in Fort Worth. She has a picture of me when I first came out of there. That's the picture that you should have really got. But I could.
Email it to us? Can you scan it and email it to us?
Yeah, I can get it from her.
Well, that's important. We'll give you a business card. You need to email that to me. If you can ask her to email it to us, that'd be great. And they brought some pictures today too. So, I hate to stop you, but I want to get a little bit of Gary. But listen, at the end of my film, I hope you're comfortable with this. At the end of my films, the Vietnam films, I always have the veterans salute into the camera. Can you do that from where you're seated? Perfect. All right.